The video that I have prepared for tonight is one video, and it's a body camera video that I believe shows the incident well, and I think it gives a good perspective and helps inform as to what happened. So I am going to see if I can get this thing pulled up.
So we're on 579, right, Rich?
No, it's 1716. That
Okay,
Ricardo wanted to do the old one first, so let me figure out how to.
No, go ahead. No, let's do the new one first.
Yeah, that's what I thought I heard.
1716.
1716 is the new one. Mostly because while the Taser rules have not changed, what is in the portal has changed, in that we are now being more careful and requesting everything in there. And I know that both dates and materials and what is accessible today is not the same. It also, we're getting ahead in the agenda, but I think it's good. We have always had the prerogative to ask for every available piece of information, but in actuality, there were only pieces of it available at times, or we just didn't have the rigorous practice of putting it in there. And that includes then the more recent desire that I've had with you guys in requesting that all unredacted videos also exist in the portal, just as we've requested that unredacted documents are in the portal. That way, the full picture is there, and then the redacted ones that get put out for public, for FOIA, or in these kind of settings are available there. But we know and we can pinpoint what the public does not see. And we are trusted with the whole thing, because ultimately our decisions should be, and I think are, based on as much information as possible. So anyway.
And I'm sorry, Rich, 1716 is the new one. I apologize.
That's okay. No worries.
16 is the new one. I've got all the PDFs open, but man, I've got a whole cadre of them here. So
I got the same thing going on my screen right now, so I understand what you're talking about. Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen here the way that Jason Liggett taught me. So bear with me for a hot minute. Let's see if I can. So let me read for you the description, the brief description first. On February 6th, 2019, at approximately, excuse me, wrong one. On April 13th, 2019, at approximately 1:45 p.m., UPD officers were dispatched to report of a subject armed with a handgun walking around an apartment complex after a fight had occurred earlier. Officers were provided with a description of the subject supposedly armed with a handgun. They then observed a person matching the description as the armed subject walking through a courtyard near officers. When the subject noticed the officers, he quickly changed direction and entered a nearby building. Officers entered the building and found him sitting on the top step of the stairs. Officers directed the subject to show his hands and asked him to step down to the ground level. The officers intended to pat him down for weapons. The subject did show his hands, but did not come down the stairs. The subject was asked a second time to come down to the stairs. The subject still refused to come down. Another officer then ordered the subject to come down the stairs to the ground level so he could be searched. The subject stood up and then immediately began to run down the opposite side of the stairwell away from the officers. As the subject was coming down the opposite side stairwell, a Taser officer attempted to tase the subject as he was running out the apartment door. One barb did connect with the subject's back. However, the second barb struck the subject's hood on his sweatshirt. Neuromuscular incapacitation was not achieved, and the subject continued to flee from officers. Officers chased the subject on foot through the parking lot and into another apartment building where they caught up to him. The subject was unable to flee anymore as he had been contained by a locked entry door. Officers grappled with the subject and forced him to the ground. He was ultimately arrested. An ambulance was summoned due to the arrestee complaining of back pain, and he was transported to the hospital before being placed into custody at the county jail. He was charged with resisting obstructing a peace officer. So that's the quick summary, and this is the body camera footage Let me just make sure that you're seeing what I'm seeing. Yep, okay.
I think we're 822, right?
Yeah. You don't bring weapons, nothing on you, man?
It was on.
Do me a favor, can you sit down here and talk to us?
I just got here.
Okay, can you sit down and talk to us real quick?
What do I do? I didn't
So
do
you need to
nothing.
step down here, we're giving you a direct order.
All right, shit.
Keep your hands where we can see them. Come down here. Come down here. Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Show me your hand! Show me your hand! Don't move! Show us your hands!
Put your hands out!
Put your hands out!
Put your hands out!
I ain't do shit.
Put your hand down!
I ain't do shit.
Put your hand down!
I ain't do shit.
Give us your
Hold
hands.
it!
Good, I got you.
I
Give us your hands. Don't fight it, give us your hands. Okay, you around with it. 1024 curve. Between the line, Bruno. Be cool.
Ow. I ain't do shit, man. Ow.
I'm moving around.
Loosen these cuffs. Loosen these cuffs, please. Ow. Ah. Ah. Ow.
Don't pull
Stop
down.
moving around.
Okay.
Give us a second, we'll loosen the cuff. Just calm down for a second and wait.
You got anything on you, man?
No, goddamn.
I hope the screen share worked. Did it?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about this case?
So Officer Searles, so they didn't find a handgun on this individual, correct?
No, they did not. And my understanding is after they got into the situation a little bit more, they determined this was not the person that was supposedly seen with a gun.
Right. That, I mean, in reading the reports, it seems like the description didn't fit this individual. I believe Metcad described the person as having jeans on and a dark hoodie with red lining. And then there was a follow-up interview with one of the witnesses, and they said it was a light colored jean or a khaki. And this individual that ran from the police had like sweatpants on. It seems, and all the other reports, I believe, if I'm stating this correctly, it wasn't included in your summary, that no one actually saw a firearm during any of the two reported complaints about a person with a firearm. And then later,
I can't speak to the description because I wasn't there, and of course I didn't make the stop.
Sure.
I did briefly review the report, and there was at least one witness that saw somebody waving a gun around. No, was it a real gun? I cannot say. It was the grad student witness, if you remember that person.
Oh yes, that one is right. And then there was some further. The police further talked to somebody who thought they were stretching the truth about a report of the handgun, or someone used a toy gun to do something. Is that correct? Is that?
You know, this is a 30-page report. I don't remember all the intricacies behind this in terms of you know, what each witness said. You know, the question here, it seems to me, is, was this an appropriate use of a taser?
Sure.
You know, so you know, he was arrested for resisting obstructing, and that was all he was charged with.
Right. You know, I mean, my other question is, you know, according to the city policy, mere flight is not a good cause to deploy the taser. You've got to have a fleeing suspect wanted or suspected of committing a felony involving violence.
Sure, but of course, this person was at the time, what the officers knew at the time was described similar to what the suspect was. So they initiated a Terry stop for that reason. And if they have a reason to believe that he was armed, then I would absolutely contend that it was an appropriate use of a taser.
I think the reports indicating that the description of the suspect in my opinion, don't necessarily match who they've stopped with this individual. And the policy, I think, a felony involving violence, are you saying that possession of a handgun is a violent felony? Does that define somewhere else? Because I couldn't find that in the policy.
So the answer to your question is yes. What that's really referencing when this policy was initially developed in, I don't know, what was it, 2015, Scott and Ricardo, something like that.
Yeah.
The litmus test that we used for purposes of making the decision making a little bit easier for officers is we had it match our vehicle pursuit policy. So we mirrored the language between the two.
Okay. I guess I'm a little. It seems like a felony involving violence.
I think if there's people
that's
arguing,
where I have a question where
Sure.
whether or not it was a good use of it, especially since, again, the part of the description that this individual matched was a dark hooded sweatshirt, minus the red detail, and then the pants are just not even there. There's no match there. So that's my concern with the deploying of this when we're the suspect here is not really even a suspect yet. I mean, they were just trying to question him, correct? I mean, they didn't think he had there was nothing in the reports that I read that would have led the officers to believe that this person was armed at all.
I disagree. I think at the time that they had the description was general enough and what the person was wearing was reasonably close enough. And that coupled with his behavior to immediately turn and walk away from the officers when he saw them was enough to go ahead and initiate a Terry stop. I firmly agree that there would have been enough here for a pat down for sure. With respect to does it meet the guidelines for a felony involving violence? If the reporting party initially reports that there's somebody outside waving a gun around in the air, you tell me, is that a felony involving violence? I would argue the answer is yes. If I got a report of someone, waving a gun around in the air in the midst of a fight and they got into a car, would I chase them? My answer is yes. I would chase them in a car. So
question, Terry stop is something that I don't know what that means.
Sure. So there's a case called Terry versus Ohio, and it relates to detention, the stopping and detention of people to determine if they're involved in a crime. The standard is fairly low. I'm sure Mr. Allegretti could probably give you an hour on it because that's the world he lived in for a long time. But essentially what it says is if you think that somebody has been, is, or is going to be involved in a crime, you can stop them.
Okay.
You need to have individualized, articulable, reasonable suspicion to do so. So it has to be individualized to that particular person, which is where the description, I think, comes into play.
For sure. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I totally understand your perspective and why you're questioning it.
I like that we get right into those details too. I honestly didn't want to hear necessarily whether the guy was involved or not afterwards or what the resolution of this is, especially because when we read a case, there is enough information from different angles that we don't even know yet often. One, it was the person culpable. And two, was the officer knowing that full knowledge? That is, they usually not. They're walking into a situation. And so for me, the video that we just saw is missing. What does the officer know in the video? We hear it then from the summary that you provided, Rich. But the thing, this thing about state of mind when you walk into a situation, to me, is now very relevant. Because personal, when I remember I was in one training, and I've always pushed back on police for being so in your face and yelling. And I remember in one of the trainings that had various outcomes, what happened when I had a gun and the person on the video was not obeying and showing me his hands. Completely, I heard myself screaming at the person because on another iteration, that person had pulled a gun, and I was all of a sudden in a situation in which I don't know whether he has a gun. And not that I don't want to lose the game. It is a simulation, but at that point you don't even think. And so I thought to myself, if this guy has a gun and he's not showing me his hands, it might be because he has a gun. So I ended up screaming at this person, and then I was analyzing myself and saying, why did I scream? Because my heart was all over the place. And then when he did shoot at me at the other iteration, he shot all over the place and I shot all over the place, and no one shot each other, but we both pulled a gun with the intention of shooting each other, which taught me again, when you walk in, there is all kinds of things of going inside both people's heads. And that's what they're working with. So in this case, for me, walking in, did I check his jeans? No, but there's another officer right there at the bottom. And that to me was a trigger of that's what he had to work with. Anyway.
And maybe I didn't see this or hear this on the video, but when the officers approached the gentleman that was there, did they say why they were stopped? I heard them say stop, but I didn't hear them say why. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Because he was going, I don't know if he lived there or not, but like Anthony said, number one, the descriptor was wrong. So if you're looking for someone in a black shirt, he had on a black hooded shirt, which is different than a black or blue, whatever color it was, sweatshirt and jeans. There's a distinct difference between denim blue jeans and sweatpants. So to that person that I don't know, him stopping, I didn't do anything, I'm going in here, why should I stop? And then that's what I'm trying to think. In those instances where the officers have a descriptor, which was wrong in this instant, what made them stop this person? Was it just solely based on because he was African American? Was it solely based on because he had on a sweatshirt? Like, out of all the people in Town and Country Apartments, which I'm sure that's what it appeared to be, why did they single out this person?
Right. So my understanding from reading this was, they had multiple calls coming in, and different bits of information gets to the officers. With respect to your point that, were they providing a clear understanding to the person on the top of the stairs as to what was going on? No, I don't believe they had gotten that far. They were trying to get him down, and then when they directed him down, that's when the fleeing all took place. Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual for officers to get descriptions of people that are inaccurate or wrong or just sort of close. It's not unusual for us to get, a description, dark clothing. Well, that's not very specific. So, I can't really speak to the difference in clothing that Mr. Allegretti is talking about. If the description is a dark hoodie and, black or blue, whatever, and the pants are different, the officer sees somebody in the area generally wearing the same sort of clothing. Is it an exact match? No, apparently not. But I think that coupled with the apparent aversion to the officers is what sort of keyed them up. And when they went to went to talk to him, that's when the situation happened.
Just the parentheses, as far as I understand from the reports, the people arguing were all African American. Am I incorrect? I don't like to dance around that race because there's an issue and then there's a fact in front of us. You all see that I'm Indian, Mexican looking. And if you were going to write a report about me, I would want you to write it down because that's what you're seeing. Your eyes shouldn't be lying to you. So for me, in this particular case, pinpointing the person, if race is part of the description of the person, then you should say it and we shouldn't tiptoe around it. That's what was said. That's what was in front of them. That's what they did. So I'm glad that we're talking about the clothing, but we should not neglect to point out that the context is what matters. If a person is judged by their race only or faulted because of their race, then we have a problem. But in this case, for me, the description is important because if I were there, that's what I see. And I would want another person not having been there to get an accurate description of what happened. So I know it's not a question yet. I have a couple of questions, but I want to wait.
Deputy, the METCAD description that would have gone over, that would have been heard by all the officers, correct?
I would hope so.
Okay, because I think the other, setting aside the clothing, the other main part of the description was tall, skinny, black male from the dispatch.
Yeah, can you tell me what page you're on?
Sure, it's
I'm trying to scroll through and I can't scroll as fast as the questions are coming.
yeah, it's
16.
16.
That's where I see that description.
yeah, that's
Okay.
I think that's right. Sorry.
Paragraph starts at approximately 1350 hours.
Okay. Yeah. Black male. Tall,
Yes, that's
skinny,
right.
Dreadlocks, black shirt, jeans. Short time later, updated the description was tall, skinny black male with short dreadlocks, dark hooded sweatshirt and jeans.
Right. And I mean, and the individual that was stopped, he was, in the report, it says he's 5'11", 210 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
descriptions are all relative. The average U.S. male is 5'8". So is he tall?
Sure.
I don't know. You tell me.
right. I don't know. Is 5'11" tall? I don't know if 210 is skinny.
Yeah, 210's not skinny to you. It's skinny to me, though. So, right,
Right. I understand it's all relative, but I guess, then the argument then is you can fit anyone into any description you give. It seems almost irrelevant as to what the description is if we're going to.
I don't think I would go that far. I hear what you're saying. The fact of the matter is they saw somebody with a dark hooded sweatshirt. Yeah, the pants are different, apparently. Is he tall? I would say that someone who's 5'11" is tall, but have I seen taller people? Sure. So I just, it's difficult for me to put myself in the head of the officers at the time with this level of minutia. I'm sure you understand. If you're looking for me to provide you a rock solid reason as to why, I'm sort of extrapolating it the best I can from reading the reports, just like you.
Right. No, and I'm not trying to terribly cross-examine you right now.
It's okay.
Yeah,
I
guess I have to note too, Tony, that the paragraph you're referencing, kind of as the antecedent to this, doesn't say blue jeans. It just says jeans.
Right.
So there are all kinds of colors of jeans, right? So
no, that's true.
The blue thing and the black thing, we got to throw that out. I think this is a real interesting dialogue to have because the public can see this, and
sure.
I mean, we're getting into some of those assumptions that have to be made real time by officers as they are happening, and so I think it's really good for us to process those in the context of whether or not that was a good application of the Taser. are whether a taser should have been applied or whether it meets those criteria. In my opinion, the police go in there after having a report of a gun. They come into the scene. They're searching the area. This guy fades on them and so makes his presence known, and he's given a direct request to stop, and he doesn't. So if there's anything that I want to say to this community out wide, when we think back to really bad things we've had happen in these towns, is if you are given a direct instruction by an officer, comply. This man chose not to, thereby putting himself.
And it could have been, sorry to interrupt you, it could have been out of fear. It could have been out of fear.
Absolutely.
Number one, and like Rich said, they got the descriptors from Metcalf. So if Metcalf said this tall African-American male with blue jeans, men usually don't wear blue jeans that are gathered with a drawstring.
Well, it doesn't say blue.
And they were gathered at his ankle. So as an officer, and I have never been an officer, but I have purchased things for men, it's denim, regardless of what color. They don't gather at your ankle. So they should have clearly saw he was in a sweat suit. But a lot of times, one of the things that happen in our community is it's out of fear, where you have a call made and you will think, from the outsider looking in, that could have been handled with one police officer or two police officers, because I think sometimes they ride in two. But then you'll see on the side of the road or other videos where it's 2 or 3 cars for 2 people. So why did it take 8 police officers to stop these 2 people? So his non-compliance could have been out of fear. And there's a way, hopefully, that we can better educate. But a lot of times when you see that, as an African-American, sometimes the police, you're frightened just by the amount of numbers it is, and you're one person. So and we don't know, and unfortunately the taser was used, and the outcome, he was not the right person. But a lot of times people don't understand the fear that some policemen have just by their presence. And hopefully we can change that mode where you see them and don't think this person is out to get me, where they're there to protect you. But that could have been his, why are they stopping me? It's not me. I'm going wherever I'm going. They don't need me. And then he panicked and he ran. So it could have been out of fear.
Katrina, I agree with you. Fear, I think, drives both the person on the street and the police thinking that there might be a gun. But what I found interesting in one of the reports, I don't know which one, the officer one was very accurate in saying this was black or dark top and dark bottom. That is, even though he has other information, he points out what he sees. That big point. But on the other, from the residents, the policeman says, when he saw our car, he started walking the other way. I will put myself in that position, because black or brown, whenever I see a cop coming in a particular direction, especially if the lights are on, I do walk in the opposite direction. I'm Mexican. And if I'm in a situation in which there might be danger, I want to be out of there, because I don't want the mistake to be made. And so fear does drive me in those situations away from the scene, not running. I know better, and I'll stick with you, Scott, there. I will comply with whatever the officer says, but I do not want to be there when or if something goes down.
Deputy Sherrill, sorry, one quick follow-up. When he got him in the other corridor, did he try and do the follow-up dry stun, or did he not? It didn't look like he was pulling the trigger. I couldn't tell if it happened or not.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that was a question I had this morning when I was reading the reports, trying to refresh myself a little bit. He did not pull the trigger. So the tasers, that particular taser has 2 cartridges. So the taser officer fired one as he was going out the door. You could kind of see the wires kind of bounce around in the video. when they caught up to him in the foyer there, he held it to him, but he did not pull the trigger again. And the reason I know that is you didn't hear the audible pop, which we were talking about earlier, and there weren't other taser wires coming out of him. So he didn't use it the second time.
Yeah, he couldn't have done a completion because the one that hit must have come off already. I mean, as much as he ran, I mean, was there one that was actually still connected to the taser?
I think so.
So he was probably far enough ahead that the wires were broken.
Yeah.
But my understanding is he had a probe in his back and then a probe in his hood.
Right. Yeah. But what I mean is that he couldn't have drive stunned because the wires to the first hit had been disconnected.
Right. So now's probably a good time to talk about drive stuns versus drive stun follow throughs. There's misinformation out there about that.
Right.
The police department has had a policy. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up a document here. The police department has had a policy in place since we implemented the Taser program. And there's two sections of the policy that feel like they cross over, but they don't. And there's an important distinction here. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen again with you. So I just copied this stuff onto a Word doc, but our Taser policy is posted online. I've got a copy of the legacy policy here, and this language has not changed between the initial draft of the policy, which was worked on with the CPRB subcommittee, and the secondary policy issuance, which was worked on a second subcommittee of the CPRB. So policy 304.5, use of taser, and I've highlighted it just so everybody can see it. The use of drive stuns, which is defined as the physical application of the taser to the body of another for the specific purpose of pain compliance, is prohibited. And we talked about that in our training. And the reason that we prohibit them is, number one, that doesn't use the taser the way it was really intended to be used. The purpose behind the taser is to get that neuromuscular incapacitation, the involuntary tightening of the muscles. And drive stuns does not achieve that. It's just a pain compliance technique. However, in a secondary portion of the policy, 304.5.4, all the way at the bottom, it says, if there appears that a probe contact has not been made, completion of the probe contact with the main unit would be allowed to complete the electrical circuit. So let me stop sharing my screen there. What that means is, let's say we're talking about the case that we just had. Tony's the officer. I'm running away from him. Fleet of foot, and he shoots the taser, and he gets one probe in me. And let's say I fall down. He's only got one probe in me. The electrical circuit is not completed. If you then take the main body of the taser, this is my cell phone taser, and apply it to anywhere on the body, it completes that electrical circuit. And what you get out of that isn't the pain compliance. You get the neuromuscular incapacitation. That is fundamentally different than a drive stun. A drive stun is for pain, where the probes are on the face of that taser body, and the electricity is arcing between the two contacts, versus a drive stun follow through. There's some other euphemisms for it, but that's what it is. It's a drive stun follow through where there's one probe in and you complete the circuit with the main body.
Wait a minute, Rich. Should I have experienced a dry stun to tell the difference between a full taser and a dry one? I mean, when you're being zapped, I mean, I've been zapped. I do occasional work of electricity. It is not at all what a taser feels like. A taser, there's that incapacitation thing, but there is a whole body experience. It's not just my muscles reacting. It is a very much like when you get shocked, but in a whole different level.
I can't describe the difference between volts, amps, ohms, watts, all that stuff. It's been a while since I've had that. It is the experience of a drive stun is not like if you get zapped in a wall outlet. It is different. Is it different than what you experienced? Yes, it is. And the reason it's different is you had that involuntary contraction of muscles, that neuromuscular incapacitation, where you felt like you couldn't move. Versus a drive stun, a regular drive stun, you just get pain localized where the unit is touching the body. And we don't do this. We do the drive stun follow through for the purpose of completing the circuit, because we want that neuromuscular incapacitation. That's the point behind the tasers, so we can get that lockup. So hopefully we can get the person under control and handcuffed. So if you, I guess to answer your question, if you want us to drive stun you, we can, but I would not recommend it.
No, I just want to make, if there is a distinction on the actual pain,
it feels different.
It feels different, but on the other hand, if it's, if you will, a torturing, because that's what the distinction seems to be, to cause pain, and you don't want to just go cause pain for no reason. But on the other hand, if the effect is the same, I end up with that whatever amount of time pain. I am no longer able to do whatever I want to do because I'm in pain.
Yeah, the fundamental difference is neuromuscular incapacitation versus non-neuromuscular incapacitation.
Yeah, Tony, I think I had the same question about exactly what was happening with the taser. And I couldn't tell whether the officer was just was actually trying to do a completion to finish, but then I didn't make any sense because I didn't think the probes could be in.
Yeah, so
obviously with the hoodie, they weren't going to be able to probably complete a drive stun anyway, and they know they're not supposed to. So I don't know whether it was like, well, I don't know what to do with my hand, this thing's in my hand, or just exactly how it went down.
I'm gonna look in my crystal ball a bit and speculate what I think the officer was doing. I think what he was trying to do was, number one, take away any possibility that if he had to use the taser that he would miss. Right? Because if you've got that contact, you're not gonna miss. You're not gonna accidentally tase somebody else. You're not gonna tase them in the wrong spot. So I think, believe it or not, and again, this is speculation. I think that was part of it. I think part of it was to try to impress upon him that there was a taser against his body, because he had already tried to tase him once before. I don't know the answer to that question. It is not spoken to in the reports. I did not think to ask the officer in advance about why this specific tactic was employed, but that's my guess.
So coming back to policy and our purpose here, by reviewing the cases, one is to shed light on what happened and get some lessons for it. The second one is, was this a proper use of the taser given what we wrote in the rules for them to be? And for me, one of the ways to tease out how a situation might fit a rule is where to parse out those things in which it definitely, where the option that was used it compares to other options. So if you want to go to proper, what would have been improper? Or on further down the line, as far as relevancy, was the use of a taser compared to the use of a gun? Because those are options that the officer had, or a baton or whatever else. So to throw those out first so that we can concentrate on the exact use of, but we know that those options were in consideration. So anyway, we have to get to the point of closing our thinking of this by agreeing that there was proper use or improper use, either one. And I'll start it out by this way. In the video, we saw an officer running from from a building to another. And as they cross the street and they cross the sidewalk, I see a carriage with a mom and a kid. I'm assuming it goes very fast. I went back to see it. And I think to myself, if a person is being chased across the street, and we see obviously the officer carrying this gun-like thing, but it is not a gun. That to me already throws out the possibility that I am so glad it was not a gun.
Well, in that same vein, at one point, the officer did draw his gun.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He documented it in his report. He said he saw his hand in his pocket or something, and then when his hand came out, he holstered his pistol. I actually took a bit of exception with that. And the reason that I took a bit of exception with what the officer did there was because at one point he had a pistol in one hand and a taser in another hand.
Policy says you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, that's counter to our policy. I understand why it happened. I don't think he should have done it. Things get messed up, right? So one of the things that happen in stressful situations is whatever you do with one hand, you do with the other. It's called a sympathetic reflex. And so what happens is if you're squeezing with this hand, you end up squeezing with this hand. It might not be to the same degree, but it might be so much as to pull the trigger on a taser or pull the trigger on a gun. Okay. And so that's the reason that we have in the policy that you're not supposed to have your taser and your pistol in the hand at the same time, because things can just get too confusing, and you end up shooting when you meant to tase, and you end up tasing when you meant to shoot. So yes, at one point the officer did have his gun drawn. I was glad to see that he reholstered it, but at one point both of his hands were filled.
Yeah.
Rich, barring I say this not for other reason than just to clarify. Were the other things that happened in this case that could have been done better?
Let's see, what could have been done better? So one of the things that I noticed when I was reading this report was whatever situation was dealt with initially apparently wasn't completely resolved. I don't know if the officers had an opportunity to resolve it or not, because you have to remember this sort of came out as a continuation of a previous fight, right? So I would be curious to know whether or not there was something that could have been done on the previous call to resolve that situation. My guess is the answer is no, but I would be curious to know about that. With respect to the stopping, the detention of the guy in this case, from a tactical perspective, I would have probably preferred to have an officer on the opposite stairwell, but there was a handful of officers there. There was two down at the base, and then there was the taser officer. So maybe that's not a good choice. I don't know. I completely agree with the officers to not go up the stairs. I think that would have been a tactical mistake. If something were to happen and there was a fight, the last place I want to get into a fight is on a set of stairs. I mean, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. So I'm glad the officers didn't go up the stairs. The foot chase, he almost got run over by a car. Both the subject and the officer, and unfortunately, those are things that we have to worry about in foot chases. There was the gun and the taser in the hand at the same time.
What about the number of officers? I think Katrina makes a good point as to the large response.
So there were a number of officers on this call. I'm trying to see if I can pull up the reports.
As you do, I just want to comment for the public. There are a lot of both reports and versions of what they knew, and we end up getting into the why they were arguing and who all was there and everything else. For us, that's irrelevant. It's easy to go down that track and figure out and want to say, well, they should have. But for me, the taser is what we're reviewing. The rest either goes to lawyers or whatever else. But the taser part is what we're refining. Is that enough time, Mr.
4. I see 4.
Four?
Yeah, so looking at what we call the face sheet, which is sort of the cover page of the report, in total there were 5, 7. They arrived at different times. They were doing different things. So there weren't 7 people with him. I believe there were just the 3. The female officer that sort of pulls ahead and initially grabs him, she was, if I recall correctly, interviewing somebody else at the time. And she sees this, or she was pulling in and she sort of sees this going down. Were there too many officers there? That's tough to say with a man with a gun call. I mean, I've been to a man with a gun call just by myself. That's uncomfortable. I've been there with just one other officer. That's very uncomfortable. It doesn't take a lot of stuff to occupy 1 or 2 officers. One of the principles that we teach officers in the academy, and we teach here, and a lot of other agencies subscribe to, is the concept. It's often referred to as the concept of mass. If there's 1 person, there's 2 officers. That way, it's easier for the 2 officers to effectively control, arrest, detain, question, whatever the case is, and be safer doing it. Less force is used. It's easier to get them in control, things like that. So the general rule of thumb is 2 to 1. But in a man with a gun call, I don't think it's necessarily inappropriate that 2 officers were initially talking to him and the 3rd was coming up.
Well, it's also true that you're trying to search for this person in a multi-unit apartment complex that contains multiple buildings, right?
Oh yeah, where this happened is
scene that is an acre in size.
It's the largest apartment complex in Champaign County.
Deputy, what happens if we remove the taser here? And does the chase and arrest play out differently? Because he deploys it, it doesn't work, and he basically uses it as a way to comply to the subject. Aside from using it at the very end, which it seems like he's caught by the other officer, as you were saying, he was interviewing somebody else. So, it kind of begs the question: if we remove the taser, does anything change?
I think that's a great question. And again, using that crystal ball, I'm guessing the answer is no. It didn't slow him down, right? Did it somehow slow him through the discharge and the noise that he heard? No. Maybe the pinch when he got hit with the probe in his back. I would guess not. I think the foot chase looks basically the same.
Does the officer catch him at the door if he's not busy trying to aim and fire the taser, do you think? Or is he still?
Well, as someone who has been thoroughly ineffective in foot chases over their 24-year career, who's to say? Who's to say? My guess is probably not. I mean, most of the time, most of the time in foot chases, if you don't catch them in the first 25 yards, it just turns into an endurance match. So my guess is again, speculation, probably not. I think it plays out the same. I think there's just less wires and this case isn't being reviewed by you. I think that's really the difference.
One last thing I want to show, I want to share the screen of the redacted use of Taser report. This is what we called it. I remember as you work through this, one question that we had that in this case did not pertain, but I was glad to be reminded of this. Basically, who ordered that a taser be used? And the question that we ended up putting, I think this, this was nicely synthesized because I don't remember actually choosing these words, but the intention is there and it's fulfilled. Who ordered the use of the taser? We were afraid that somebody would say, well, somebody else told me to do it. Or in the case of an office or a hierarchy saying, well, he told me to do it, so it's not my fault. Well, whose fault is it? Well, I didn't have enough information, so I ordered him to do it. In this case, it's very clear that the officer who had the taser decided to use it. And I think, as Tony points out, it ended up not being useful for the intended purpose. The second one is what the mental health situation, but especially what happens after the use of the taser. I think it's required that there should be a medical exam made of the person. And in this case, they take them to Carl ED for back pain. And I think that's important because that used to be one of my fears. What does a taser do to a person and how do we know? Well, we decided to document it as much as possible in the report. And in this case, there's nothing unusual about that, but it is important that we know that it's available for other situations in which a taser is deemed to be used.
Yeah, another question that's on that, and I'm on a different page here in the filings, but obviously we have two taser incidents here. We have a display and a discharge.
Mhm.
The officer at the bottom of the steps notes, I displayed my taser towards him as he reached the top level and turned his back toward me, indicating that we do not have success here in the context of some of the questions that are on that same form about whether or not the display of the taser, as we're hoping, kind of stops people and makes them kind of reevaluate what their actions are. And so that is, that's in the second page of that report. I'm having a little bit of a, oh no, yeah. In the second page of the report, it says the display or laser deter, or oops, you just took my screen away.
Sorry about that.
Deter, gain compliance from the subject, and no, appropriately is circled in the context of the officer that was at the bottom of the steps, not the one that ended up firing. So just something else, you can tease out of these reports if you look at them. So there are actually two taser uses on, I don't want to say on display, two taser uses in this case. So.
Yeah, and looking over that form, it looks like we probably need to go ahead and touch it, make some minor tweaks to it based on some changes of a couple things. If you recall correctly, that form was boilerplate, and we altered it and added a bunch of different things because I think it was originally a one-page form. It's now a two-page form.
Yeah, it was. We tried very hard to put it on one page.
Yeah.
It also helps. One thing that I learned in the training that I had forgotten is that it is the intention of the taser to hit somebody in the back, or at least in where there is sufficient space for both probes to go into the person and not have it be at the heart level or the face level or the groin area. So now you end up with areas in which you could cause harm, and given the fast pace of things, that's hard, because if you had a gun in your hand, I don't know where they would point, but it would probably not be the legs. It would probably be the most damageful areas. So anyway,
Yeah.
we have had some learning as far as both form, but actually now in this case, what happened.
I think it was a hard shot for this guy who got this person, for the officer to try to take. But I don't think it violates the use policy that we have. All things accepted about identifying or maybe even profiling this person. The use of the device, I think, was was proper, if a difficult shot to make. So.
Tony makes the point that using it when not in a felony, what's it called? I forget what the words used. Is
violent involving violence.
Yeah.
So are we? I mean, just if we're expressing our opinions about the usage, I think that's where I get hung up here about when it should have been used. I think this is more of a pure flight scenario. Whether this person was a suspect, based on the information they had, I would tend to disagree with based on the information. And again, I think it's an open question. Is possession of a handgun a violent felony? I think there may be a large contingency of this country that would say no. having a handgun is a constitutional right, and if you're going to treat me as a violent person just because I have a firearm, I think we run into that. It played devil's advocate of regarding Second Amendment. I think there's an issue with the way the policy is written. And maybe if they're going to include it as include it or adding handguns to this, or if charges involving a weapon, that might have fit the bill here for it to be used. And the other thing is using the taser didn't change anything. So I don't know if that kind of pushes it over the edge for me as to that this should have been used in the first place, because it didn't do anything.
Yeah, I have to argue about that, Tony, because I think what we have to do is to decide whether the use was appropriate for the circumstance, not what the outcome was.
Right. I mean, the circumstances were armed person with a handgun, and we don't know where. I mean, they didn't say he was in this particular building. I think it sounded like they were outside, but I could be wrong about that too. That kind of cuts, I think, against the use, because we don't know. I'm not sure what the purpose. I'm not sure why this particular individual was narrowed in on, outside of the fact that he had a black hoodie. I mean, the rest of the description is tough for me. That's my issue. And and this person responds with it's fight or flight with him. He's not going to fight with the officers, so he runs, which is where we get into the issue with the policy of, mere flight isn't enough. So if we'll give that he's a suspect, let's say he matches the description, we'll give that here for argument's sake. Then do we have a violent felony? And I've read the statutes, not just or the ordinances, but I don't think the Illinois compiled statutes would classify mere handgun possession as a violent felony. And that's where I get hung up here. And that may be too much of, lawyer brain interjecting here, but, I think that's, I would read that as it being not allowed per the policy. I can see the other way. I totally understand, it's a handgun, it's a serious situation. But
yeah. So to agree with you on gun, the further west and south we go, the more it is my right.
Right.
But I also have the experience that in my hood, whenever there's a gun, they were no longer doing rocks. We're not doing anything else. There's one gun in the mix. The rules change for how I'm going to act on the street. So that to me is a trigger. And therefore, if anybody has a gun, even if they don't not draw it, that changes to me the situation. In any case, we need to get to the point of making a decision, a yes or no, was this proper use of policy? As far as we, as our charge goes, we do not punish. We don't have that power. That could be that part of that toothless talk. But we do have to come to a conclusion of where we are and then put it forward. So unless there's more discussion or anybody else wants to say what they want, before we do a vote, I think that we need to just get to that.
Sure, well, I'll just make a motion that, I don't have this case in front of me, although Rich and I were talking about numbers.
1716.
Thank you so much. 1716, that we find that the use of the taser was appropriate.
Okay, I need a second. Okay, do I have an alternate motion?
I'd just make the motion that the taser usage was not appropriate per policy 304.5.1 in regards to fleeing suspect committing a felony involving violence.
Do I have a second for that motion?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a seconded. So to vote, we need to do a roll call.
Mr. Allegretti,
Which motion are we?
Here,
Yours, it was improper.
Oh, I vote yes.
Mr. Diaz,
No?
Mr. Dossett,
no,
Ms. Kendall,
Which motion are we, that it was improper?
yes,
Yes, I agree it was improper.
Mr. Rice,
I agree. Improper.
3-2,
So, yes,
just counting.
thank you. We have 3-2. So this board has just agreed by majority that in this particular case, there was an improper use of the taser for the various reasons that have come up. There is no further action from us in this.
Mr. Diaz, might I?
Yes,
So I'm trying to pull the ordinance real quick. I believe that the board needs to send something to the chief. Let me find it here real quick.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 19-46 is kind of where it starts. It's on page, I can't see page number, page 10. In 1946B, the CPRB's recommendations, if any, and reasons thereof shall be provided to the human relations officer, who shall prepare a report that contains these recommendations and other information which he deems necessary and appropriate. If we want to make a recommendation concerning changes in policies, procedures, protocols, or practices, we need to provide reasons for that. That's kind of what the second meaty part of it says.
Might I offer a bit to contemplate before you draft whatever it is you draft? And I think this sort of dovetails with what Mr. Allegretti was talking about. So the policy that he referenced isn't really codified in state law. It's a bit it came from the vehicle pursuit policy. And so and I don't want to put words in Mr. Allegretti's mouth, if he feels as though the language is maybe also a bit too imprecise, because at least to me, it seems fairly broad, you might consider discussion about maybe tailoring and narrowing. I don't know, Mr. Allegretti?
Yeah, no, I think it's just, it needs to be, the felony involving violence needs to be parsed out, I think, a little bit, or added to. I mean, if that's what the board, or I mean, well, I guess that would be the police department's decision as to what to draft. So our recommendation would be, and I don't know if it would need to just be clarified. I think would be, if they're going to add handguns, that's all well and good, but I think it should be there, because I think the way it's written, just it doesn't include it, and I think that's what the vote was mostly on. But again, I would also defer to Tony and Katrina as to why they voted that way. And maybe, I don't know, I would defer to Scott and Ricardo as to proceeding. Do we just draft something and it kind of gets passed around? I mean, I know we can only do 2 at a time.
Well, in my mind, it's Ricardo's responsibility to draft a note to the human relations officer. I guess my question is, do we have one of those? And who is that? And then I think the dialogue just proceeds. I mean, I think it's real valuable for us to talk about it like this. Although we have spent at least an hour, and maybe hour and 15 on this one case, I think it's important, especially as we do the first couple, you know.
So could I just say to your question about the HRO, I mean, we're in the process of hiring somebody and I've been standing in for that person, so you could feel free to address it to me. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks, Carol.
If I could offer a recommendation, don't draft War and Peace. Couple paragraphs, I think it will be fine. The chief and Carol or whomever it comes in to take over for that new position, I think between the couple paragraphs in this discussion, I think it's there. So, and I thought it was important to share the history of where that language came from regarding the pursuit policy. That is fairly old language in terms of policy. That policy was instituted by Chief Eddie Adair, the vehicle pursuit policy, and he was the chief 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chiefs ago. So that sort of tells you how much age it's got on it.
Ricardo, do you maybe want us to just send you a draft and then you can synthesize them?
That would be great. I've been taking my notes, but as I've stated before, to write my notes, to keep handle on the screen, and then to listen to everybody is taxing for this little mind. So I'll have my notes. If you will send me anything that you have directly to me, then we're following the law as far as open meetings, and I'll finish the draft. Circulating it back to you, you will have a copy when I send it to Carol. I hopefully will have been fair. Well, I will be fair as far as I understand. And if you need to call me on it, that's okay with me. Okay. We can clarify before it goes. All right. All right. So the disposition of this one is closed. I thank you for both the learning and having as much just processing of it is. We're going to go on to the next one. This is an old case.
Ricardo?
Yes, sir.
Ricardo, real quick before we go. I just want to have for the record that we have voted on and resulted 3-2 that the CPRB has found that the use of Taser in case 1716 was inappropriate. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I wrote it 3-2 vote rules that in this case 1716 it was an improper use of the Taser.
Improper. Thank you for. I just want to make sure I have it correct for the record. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay.
I think technically the recommendation from the board is a policy change.
And yes, it accompanies a policy change. My words say change the wording to knowing what is appropriate to felony involving violence needs to be spelled out. Is the reported presence of a handgun sufficient to meet the qualification? Which I think is what I heard too as a second. All right. So I'll use those notes to build up whatever else you send me. Okay. It's always my intent to make sure that we cover at least one thoroughly, because that learning does not disappear. As we go on to this one, you watch out for, you now know the policy, you know the forms, and you know also we're looking for specifically the use of Taser. The rest of the story is very interesting, but this is not a crime show. This is a use of Taser situation. Okay, Rich, we're going back this case to contextualize for the audience. This case happened quite a long time ago. We heard the first of it in a regular Taser review meeting. There was some information missing. It was brought at a later meeting, and then it seemed to be in pieces. So we decided to bring it all together so we have all available information. as we go. The question will come up. I'll wait for that question to come up to deal with it. Anyway, Rich, dates and if those of you that are able to look at your notes and documents from the portal, go ahead.
Okay, so do you just want me to do the whole thing? I'm
Just
giving you. what you
do a
want.
quick summary. I don't think there's one, we have the unredacted video of the squad car, and we have the particular case as it was presented, the redacted one. I think that's, if you give us that video, the short one, for context, and then we can ask questions since we have the long version available to us in the squad car version.
Okay, so you want me to play both redacted videos?
Yes, because that's what's permissible here, and we have the background of the much longer.
Okay. On February 6, 2019, at approximately 11:19 p.m., Urbana officers were dispatched to a report of a physical domestic at a convenience store. Officers were provided a specific description of the man and woman involved. Officers arrived and located both subjects nearby. Officers stopped the couple and began discussing the incident. Officers soon learned the female was one on a warrant. The female was arrested. As the arrest was taking place, the male announced that if the female was going to jail, he was too. The male then shoved a police officer. Officers grappled with the male to effect an arrest. During the arrest, a taser officer discharged his taser against the male in his midsection, but due to a limited spread of the probes, no reaction was observed. The officer then completed a drive stun follow-up to enact the neuromuscular incapacitation. After the arrest, the male threatened officers and their families with physical harm and rape. The male arrested was taken to the county jail and charged with aggravated battery to peace officer and intimidation. So let me share my screen again here. So there's two videos here. There's a bunch of unredacted videos. I heard some commentary that there were no videos and they have been deleted. That's not true. Those videos are in the portal. I haven't done a side-by-side to make sure everything is there, but I'm fairly certain it is. So what we originally saw was this video. This video is from the taser. There's the two dots in the middle of the screen. Those are the aiming devices. You'll note that this video starts essentially as soon as the action starts, because the officer, and you'll see this in the subsequent video, draws the taser and takes the safety off and fires it essentially immediately. So I'm going to play this first video, which is not terribly long for y'all to watch.
All right. Get on the ground. Turn over there. Put your hands behind your back. You guys got it? I'm so loud.
Hey, you, oh, there's no motherfucking reason.
Watch your hand, watch your hand.
She going to jail, I'm going to jail. I get keep fucked. Better come with that damn thing. I get keep fucked. White knight, racist ass, KK ass bitches. Hope y'all go to hell with my motherfucking
You
ass.
got what you wanted.
I know, I always do what I want, bitch.
Okay.
So pussy ass. Breath smell like shit.
You can smell it from there.
Hell yeah.
You're smelling it.
I smell that
You're smelling the dirt you got in your face, man.
Now I smell the breath, bitch. Hope your mama died too.
Oh, that's rude.
No, it is rude. I'm a rude motherfucker, bitch. I'm King David. Next time you see how the judge almost got his motherfucking shit split, I make sure I'll pop y'all shit, bitch. Baby, you ain't got no warrant. They fucking with your ass. Fuck you, bitch.
So I can get those darts out?
Get these darts out. On call. Phone soon. Your ass too, bitch.
That's fine. Stand the ground.
I am saying on the ground.
Okay. And this is video from a squad car. This is on an older system that we have. We kind of have a mix of video systems going on here. So this starts just before the tasing takes place.
Baby, where you going? Yeah, I'm warrant. Come on. She ain't got no damn warrant. I'm going to jail too.
Taser.
All right. Get on the ground. Hey, but I'm turn over there.
Turn over there. Put your hands on your back. You guys got it? I'm so loud.
Yeah, hey, you, oh, that's no motherfucking reason.
Watch your hand.
She going to jail, I'm going to jail. I just keep fucked. Better come with that damn thing. I just keep fucked. Why you like this? Take care of bitches. Hope y'all go to hell with my motherfucking
Well, you got what you wanted.
I know, I always do what I want, bitch.
Okay.
So pussy ass. Bitch smell like shit.
Okay. As you do that technical side, I'll ask you if you have any other information for this, but I want to now address myself to the board. We've already voted on this over a year ago. The disposition of the board at the time was that it was a proper use of Taser. Not all the pieces were together. So the first question as you see this and you saw the background leading up to this, do we want to reconsider that vote would be one of the questions, but I don't want to taint it by saying, so we now know more, we now have more experience about usage, and perhaps instead of re-voting as to the proper use, we want to comment on it because the vote is already there. If you see something inconsistent with the previous finding, we can come back to that, but we'll have to vote to reopen and to go against the previous board, which is okay with me. But I want to say is we can also leave it as is after we have a discussion about it. It's
Ricardo?
different. Yeah.
So we recently had the issue at the council, and you basically are governed by the same rules as the council on a vote for reconsideration. And a vote for reconsideration has to take place at the same meeting as the original vote. You can't do it. We couldn't even do it a week after at the council. So that's really not an option that's available to you to have a new vote. Yeah, I mean, it's been voted on. And if you wanted to vote for reconsideration, it would have had to have happened at the same meeting. That's according to Robert's rules, which is what we are governed by in the, unless there's a specific rule otherwise.
Okay, I'm going to take it as a learning. Roberts applies to us, and I think its main purpose is to keep our dialogue civil and in order. At least that's the way I take, if we followed it completely, we would miss our target many times. So for me right now, that's why I want to have first the discussion and then we decide what to do with that discussion. Because even if we are not able to reconsider by the Roberts Rules of Orders, if we need to do something for fairness, then we need to figure out how to do that. But in the meantime, I think in this case, given that we have all of the information that there is available at one sitting, we can question and discuss freely because we have not yet gotten to the question of going through the procedures. I hope I didn't.
I'm not going to beat it. I'm not going to beat this to death. I'm just going to make one final point and then I will close out and put okay. But the point is that there has to be finality to issues, right? So otherwise things could be brought back, new board members, and it could be brought back endlessly. So that's the purpose of it.
Thank you. Thank you for the point.
Can you provide the rule number just out of curiosity?
I can, and
if you don't, I'm not trying.
I mean, I can look it up. I have it on my shelf. But
don't worry about it. If you don't have it in front of you, I thought you might have.
No, it just had come up at council within the last couple of months, so it's very top of mind for me.
I can find it. If you had it off the tip of your tips, it would. Don't worry about it then.
Okay.
All right. So coming back then to the particular case, this is what we have. Of the information on which to have based the decision. We are not analyzing actually the whole of the reports necessarily today, as we're viewing for the public, but I want to hear if you have any thoughts about what happened in this interaction, specifically to the use of the taser. What did you hear? What does it, the one video, back when we didn't have body cameras, the taser was the camera for the most part in interactions like this. And so that's why the 2 dots, we were unhappily but happily using just that camera, because most of the time when the taser was drawn, it was only pointing to the ground because it was not going to be used necessarily to pull the trigger on a person, but it did record. And in this case, I think that's the value of the sound of the situation. For me, does it match the rest of the information that we have about the case, or is there anything in the sound that makes the difference? So anyway, thoughts, comments?
Ricardo, I had just a couple comments about the one about the report itself, and 2, why the officer who fired the taser. I mean, I watched the video numerous times. It almost seems like he fires it either precisely at the same time he's saying taser, 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 or he fires it first and then he starts to say taser, taser, taser. It doesn't seem like he gave the guy an opportunity to comply. Now, there was a small scuffle with the sergeant who was there. He says he was pushed. However, the use of the taser is supposed to be for someone who's actively aggressive, which we'll say that happened, and it immediately threatens serious physical harm to another person. I don't know if a push would qualify that. And it seemed like if he would have given him, if he would have just displayed it, maybe that would have, calmed things down for this guy. Reading the reports, it sounded like that this guy may have been intoxicated. He had been hanging around for a while. So one comment is, it seems like he didn't give the guy enough time to comply with he should have given a verbal warning, it seems like. And 2, I'm curious as to why it's not in the report that why he didn't give his reasons for not doing it, because that's supposed to be documented in the report. And I didn't see that in this report. Because the report may not be written that to facilitate that response. It just says, did the display cause the person to stop? And it doesn't ask the officer, did you give the verbal warning? And if not, why you didn't. So that seems to be something that could be worked out in the report as well.
Yeah, that was an understandable stream of consciousness. Can we take it one at a time?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry.
So let's start with a warning, because I agree with you. I don't think that there was. I think the firing of the taser was approximately the same time, whether it was immediately before, immediately after, essentially the same time, right? Are we required to give a warning? No, we're not. Is it preferred? Yes, it is. So I think when he says taser, 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 that's not intended to be a warning to the subject that he's firing the taser upon. It's intended to be a warning to the other officers on scene so that they know that the loud sound that they're hearing is a taser.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I didn't think that was the warning to the guy. And I don't, as far as the documenting the reasons is I didn't see anywhere for him to really write that down in the taser report.
And you're talking about the lack of the warning?
Yeah. Well, it says under 304.4B, the fact that the verbal warning or other warning was given or the reason it was not shall be documented in the discharging of the taser related report, or in the related report. And I was looking at the related report and I didn't see, it looks like it would be, did display or laser deter gain compliance? He just writes no, but he doesn't say he didn't give the display or he didn't give a warning. And there's no explanation as to why he didn't do that. And it seems like that should have been included, unless I'm missing it.
Yeah, so you're looking at the form and I'm looking at the narrative right now.
Yeah, the form doesn't give him a place really. They're not asking the form, Tony, to document that.
Oh, okay.
That's not a yes or no, just whether or not the display of the taser did elicit a satisfactory response. Although I don't think Carol's concerns can be really mitigated, and I understand her thing about Roberts, at least partly, this is kind of a new case because we didn't see the squad video. If you think about what we just saw, it was the squad car camera and the audio that was tied to that gave us that period before the discharge. When we saw this the first time, all we had were the two red lights and the bang. And so in the first time we looked at this case, it wasn't possible to make a judgment about whether there was any warning given or not. And I think if you look at the taser use policy, it is incumbent for the officer to provide a warning, although it says should precede its application. It doesn't say must. And I can guarantee you we must have looked at that when we were working on policy, and that's the word that stayed in there.
Well, but even then, though, he did. It was quick. I think, if at all, it was for the other officers or just to squeeze it in because he was already firing when he was saying it. And not to convolute, but I think of this officer somewhere across the nation, which she pulled her gun instead of her taser, but she was shouting taser at the same time. I think of that decision of your mind of going back to your training in which you're doing. I don't even know if he was doing it for the officers. He knows when he draws it, he's going to shoot. He's going to pull the trigger on it. He's got to say those words. I mean, that's got to be just part of your nature of doing it. How much time do you have to say that between the decision of making the decision that you're going to tase somebody? I honestly cannot have any idea of where it actually fits, and would it make a difference? The clicking sound that it makes is only useful for those people who have already been tased before and they know what the little electricity sound means. And I think we had agreed that was not a permissible use at the time. I don't know where we are on that rule, but now it means a lot to me. But if you've never been through it, I don't think it's necessary. It's a good warning. I don't think it's a warning for the person receiving it, necessarily. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with all I can say is that with the addition of this squad video and audio, Assistant Chief Searles started that, 5 or 10 minutes into the video that we could review. So this guy had been arguing with two officers and talking to his partner kind of over their shoulder for 5 minutes. First of all, it's my understanding that the use of the taser, as soon as it comes out, it should be turned on. Now, I was willing to kind of overlook that in the context of the quick video, and that's all that we had, and the rest of the report, which I found logical. But given the fact that they had been interacting with this guy for 5 minutes, there was more than enough time for a verbal warning clearly to precede the discharge. I don't think we got that this time. So in summary, this wasn't the beginning of this event. This was 10 minutes or so, I'm guessing, into this event. Certainly enough time for a reasonable officer to say, okay, I'm going to take the taser out and turn it on, and maybe I will have to use it, and then make a verbal warning.
Mr. Dawson, I would argue that removing the taser before the pushing and swiping and all those sorts of things would be a violation of policy. I would not want an officer to take it out just because somebody is arguing with them. I understand your point, but I don't think that the taser needed to come into the situation until hands started flying.
Yeah, well, see, that's totally, yeah, that totally runs against all of the display review that we did
In
for the
what way?
last 5 years.
In what way?
Because I saw taser, well, the reason that we stopped doing display analysis is because everybody was tired of the taser being turned on, pointed to the ground, and you would have 15 minutes of dialogue. Now, during those cases, I found it really easy to congratulate staff, the officers, for the dialogue I heard. But it's just not the case that we were limited in those display evaluations to, just when there was a fracas. I mean, I've watched hours of video where someone preemptively pulled their taser to display, or in the case that they needed to use it, and turned it on and activated it.
Sure.
I'm just asking why this didn't happen. Now, it was a rainy day. I don't know if we have problems with the tasers and rain. I mean, I think given the preamble to this event, which again is at least 5 minutes of video where this guy obviously isn't going to shut up and go away, that there was opportunity, and given your response, moreover, I would say I think it's the responsibility to try to be early if you can. Now, obviously, when the guy's chasing the guy that's jumped off the steps, and that's a totally different scenario. But there's 5 minutes of video before this taser came out.
Well, the situation didn't escalate until the guy tried sort of going around or through the sergeant.
Right.
That's when it turned into a different situation.
Yeah, and I can understand. Yes.
And in the 5 minutes preceding, what we're talking about is a very standard arrest for, if I recall correctly, a city ordinance warrant. And there were no issues with the arrestee. The arrest was fine. And as you said, he was sort of talking over. So things happen rapidly, things happen quickly. I understand your point about, the taser could have come out before, but I would argue that it would be inappropriate to display it for someone who's just sort of being generally belligerent.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I see that point. Yeah, you're right.
And one of the other things you have to remember is that early on in the process of us using tasers, we didn't have body cameras. And so the officers were sort of in a default way using the camera on the taser to capture the way people were acting. They were sort of using them as a body camera. So
that's why I like looking at displays.
Sure. No, I get it. I totally get it. I just think that for the officer to pull out the taser and provide a warning, hey, if you don't get out of here, I'm going to tase you. I think that would be overboard.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't be practice I'd prefer. Yeah,
we discussed that. One of the reasons I insisted that everybody watch the whole video, that you have as much information as possible. One, to clear up that we had or had not. There were no other recordings made. Is this right, Rich?
So this is what I have. I asked the evidence officer for the video. So I have the original redacted taser camera, which is one system. And then I have squad car video, which is what I sort of showed you. There's the redacted version that you saw. And then there's several other videos that show windshield wipers. There's some audio. There's some, the transport of him to the county jail and sort of the banter back and forth. Those are the things that we have. So what I have showed you is what I believe is the most pertinent and relevant and on point with respect to this particular case. I just don't see any reason to redact windshield wipers going back and forth.
Yeah, so agreed.
Well, and I was going to mention there are 2 other squad car videos that were available for our review. I looked at both of them. And in those cases, the squads were so far away and the wipers weren't on, actually. We're fortunate that the set of wipers closest to the gentleman were on. And I couldn't see or really hear anything in either of those 2 shorter videos. So.
One of the videos, and I didn't watch the entire thing in one sitting, included the transport. And so you get some post-arrest banter.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm talking about any indication of action leading up to the discharge.
Yeah.
So
No,
2 important things.
I'm sorry.
Just 2 important things. We were going to get to, although time is eating at us, but to write a list of what we want and need in the portal. Questions that you might have, we as board members to say, what do you want to know? And is there information collected so that we can have it at hearings such as this? To me, that's important. The second thing deriving from this has been that all videos should be put in the portal, but not go through all the redaction process unless there is a call for it, whether it's from us or from a FOIA request or whatever else. Otherwise, all that time spent preparing materials is a judgment call as to what is relevant and what, there are rules as to what to redact, but unfortunately, when you have tons of video, in this case, 3 squad, it's a lot. And so the people that are going to be subjected to it is us, unless you have a question that needs video to clarify. But not to make a decision today. The lessons learned are there for us to include all that, to put it in the portal, and to put unredacted stuff too, so we can get it just like we got here, a long version. But now to specific to the case, I thought it very interesting that in the reports, when asked, why did you get tased? The person was very conscious of saying, because I pushed the officer. It's very hard to get into people's minds under this. We can just imagine it. And not that what was written in the report is clear evidence of that's what the person was saying. But if he said it, if it was asked, then it does show me something. If he didn't say that, then that would be troublesome about the officer. But I am willing to trust it today and to say, well, the thing lit up and it was a long time to it. And I think, as I recall, to be consistent, we did not want the tasers drawn as a threat under the circumstances that we were projecting. We may have changed our minds, but that to me is proper to only pull it at the moment. Why did it go down so fast? I don't know. And we don't ask that question in the reports, because it's a lot of what ifs. And if I understand this, the reports are usually written, I don't know, not before they go home, but pretty soon thereafter, right?
Yeah, I will just let me jump in here, Ricardo. 304.4, point A says, provide the individual with a reasonable opportunity to voluntarily comply. Now, where the opportunity to voluntarily comply turns into a threat, I don't know. But certainly, when I was working through developing this policy, it was, and the reason that the question about display is on that form is because we were hoping, and it has proven true in about 30% of the cases, that if somebody knows that they're going to get tased, they chill out. They don't want to get tased. That's what the whole mythology of the muscular shutdown is about. That's why, and so
it's very real. There's no mythology to it,
which you very well know. So it has never been, in my mind, okay, it's got to be now, draw it, shoot it kind of thing. No, that's
Agreed.
not the way.
Agreed. But arguing with somebody for a long time, is that sufficient time to say, hey, man, do what we ask or forget about it?
For sure. Shades of gray. I'm just noting that
The intention.
the word threat was used, and where does that interface with the purpose of the warning is to provide the individual with a reasonable opportunity to voluntarily comply. That's what our paper says.
Yeah, agreed.
And I don't think in this case that was done. So, that's just what I'm saying.
Of course, that presumes that there was time to do it. And then, of course, that gets into the, well, what if we had done this? What if we'd done that?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Real quick dovetailing on something Mr. Diaz said, I would appreciate some additional guidance from the board about what the expectations are. I've been doing the majority of the Taser work, and Lieutenant Coker has been very patient, waiting in the wings tonight. Lieutenant Coker is going to start to come to these board meetings. I will be around. I will still come. There are some cases that might or might not involve him. He will not handle a case where he's involved. Since he's going to be new at the same time, some very specific guidance and expectations would be much appreciated so that I can help Lieutenant Coker through the process.
Well, I think that the first one, as he hears today, is that we expect all relevant information to be put in the portal. And one of the things we had put earlier on our list, if possible, and I know you guys don't control it, is to also put in the MedCat instruction. It seems to provide a piece of information that we had not learned was so important. But the second one is to have all the information there and to have it in, if you will, the rawest form, because then it's an option for us to see it if we want to or need to. And then the redacted part that is, and will continue to be very intensive. Do that only as needed, and especially given that it's so much, to have parameters for doing that. The third one is for me to make sure that that as you guys continue to make the investigations, that you consider that you have an active board that is going to be asking some questions anyway. And I know that you're making the report for the chief, but you guys tend to talk in a telegraphic. You guys know what the rules are, you know what your understandings are, but in cases especially that are going to come before us, that you do some of that work of thinking that we are your audience too. I understand not all cases have to do that, but in terms of preparation, might as well go through that a little bit so that it isn't an exercise of hypothesizing the officer. Well, if you have the officer in front of you already, then go ahead and ask those questions that us lay people are going to ask.
Okay, I understand your point. Unfortunately, I'm not able to, with respect, fully anticipate all the questions coming from the board.
Of course.
So we will do the best we can to anticipate and prepare in advance. One of the issues that will arise is if we say, okay, we've got X number of videos and we think these are appropriate and responsive, we might get a request night of, well, what about this one? Well, that one wasn't redacted. And if that one's not redacted, then all of a sudden we've hit a brick wall. So I think we can work through this process. Just understand this, that the redactions take considerable time. I mean, just downloading videos. I spent 5 or 6 hours this afternoon downloading videos. So it is a bit of a process. I would say one thing about the 911 calls. I'm not sure that we have the requisite software to redact MECAD 911 recordings. I will check and see, but I'm not sure that we can do that.
Well, you may not want to. That's unredacted. It's part of the record on the portal. The public doesn't see that, but your board has an opportunity to see it and to take that into consideration.
Understood. I appreciate that wiggle room. Thank you.
All right, that was just my short list. I welcome other comments by other members of the board as to what questions you have had in cases that were not answered by the evidence or reports in front of you. But especially, we need to do the work of spelling out this should be on the record if it exists. That way, it's not only the request to put everything relevant in there as a general blanket rule, but we can ask, did this exist? How many squad cars were there? So how many videos of squad cars do we have? Or those kind of things. They're not a getcha strategy. They're a complete record when and if we need them. And I think that it's just fair play to say, you know what? They didn't turn on their camera. And that is an answer. Might not be the one that we might want, but in most cases, it seems to be that there are many times in which cameras are, if you're the third officer or whatever else. Anyway, there might be other reasons that we may not agree with, but they are what happened. And that's the important. Anyway.
Well, I want to talk about redactions a little bit because all 3 of the 2021 cases that are in the portal have redactions in them. And I thought that we had tamped down the, as far as I'm concerned, erroneous conclusion or agreement that we had requested that complaints be redacted. No, I'm not talking about things that are made public. I'm talking about things that the board can see.
So to be clear, you're talking about police citizen complaints, not
citizen complaint forms with big blocks of black in them that includes names. All the officer names are redacted.
So we're drifting into the next item, which is it's a good point.
Okay.
In the record, there should be both versions, redacted and unredacted. If a redacted version was prepared, it should be in the portal, but the unredacted should be in the portal. It is very helpful for us to see if there was one produced with redactions on it, but the what did I call it? The raw should be what's available to the board unless there is some rule that at some point some things might be deleted. But in our case, as we consider a complaint, we should have the full information, and we miscommunicated at some point. So if we can have all the 2021 stuff also in the unredacted form, we will be better. And it's very few of them right now. So
yeah, I guess I thought we were already there, that we were already talking about that, not necessarily just the video.
No, I'm good. I just want to close off this U19-579 in a little bit.
Okay, all right. Okay.
I don't want to lose your thought. So.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right. Any more questions for, I want to say Officer Searle, sorry.
Call me Rich. That's what you've been calling me for years.
I know. So I flip because it sometimes feels like Rich, as if I knew you. You haven't taken me to a barbecue or something.
We're going to need to probably fix that, I guess.
Well, Katrina actually has never taken me to a barbecue, so no other intention, just to say. Anyway, any other questions regarding this before we can ask the question, do we reconsider and reopen? Anything else you'd like to know about what happened that night and how it was reported? You can make it as an observation point. It's fine. Okay, so if that's enough information, then the point of, is there anything to reopen here, or have we considered both the lessons and the decision that the board made a year ago, 3 months ago, whatever it was? But I think it was January of last year.
Well, it's really impossible for me to answer that question because I don't know what we recommended. Often this board has made a recommendation, has approved something, but made comment, and I don't know what we did. So in all honesty, I can't help you there.
So actually what we did was we approved this, this usage as being within appropriate use. We, during the dialogue, as has been pointed out, we asked Rich for any other information that was available. Then we saw the video a few minutes later. I'm trying to recall if there's anything else that's relevant to.
Okay, so we didn't make any, I actually can't find meeting minutes that reflect the discussion on the website. So I'm kind of unprepared about that, sorry.
So I have requested from Carol also that we have a place to put this because, again, I have to refer to it because it pains me. Because when Scott walks away, we are not going to have a lot of the history, and we need a place to hold all our minutes and all our information so that as other people both chair and become part of the board, they have a place to read and get acquainted with the tone. As was mentioned, there is a kind of the term used was case law. We are not a court. We are not obligated by it, but it is good to learn where we've been and what we've decided so that we can have some training materials as to how do you get through the gray areas to make it black and white. It's hard. So, all right. No other talking, no other questions. So, not to push back on Carol, but is there more to learn by reopening this case, or are we satisfied enough to just leave it alone for now? We don't have to vote even. Your silence will be just as loud to me.
If I might make a suggestion to maybe ease the process. If I think this case is an opportunity to, as I asked for a few minutes ago, get a clear understanding as to the expectations of the board in terms of what you want and how you want it. And so that can be just a paragraph or two in describing it, again, to help with staff time management and workload. So if there's a takeaway from this case, I believe it is at least that.
Okay, I agree, and we've begun that list. We're always open for back and forth, both with you and with the public. We eventually have to come to some decision that makes it, and our faults of not keeping or reminding each other of minutes is probably what we're trying to do here to even out. In Spanish, we say to iron out the wrinkles of the information. So, all right. Going once, going twice. All right. Taser, taser, taser. We are leaving this alone. Wait, Rich, are you want to say something?
Yeah, I would like to introduce Corey. Lieutenant Coker, if you're able to click on. Lieutenant, I said this earlier. Lieutenant Coker is going to begin to work with the board on a variety of issues. I would thank him for his patience this evening, as I would thank the board for their work this evening. But I just wanted to introduce Corey publicly. I know that all y'all have met him in the Taser training we did, but Corey's gonna start to come to these meetings. And again, if Corey needs a hand or if the board needs a hand, I'm still here to be a resource however I need to be. But I just wanted to give Corey an opportunity to just at least say hello this evening before we both leave.
Hello again. Enjoyed that opportunity going through the Taser training and meeting all of you. So I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. You had a mask then. I didn't remember you. I remember your glasses. So, all right. Thank you. Actually, this is a good time. Rich is saying goodbye.
Yeah, thanks, Rich.
I'll still be around if you need something. I'll be sure to help. And
I
it's
know where
fine.
you work. I know where you work.
Yes, you probably even have my email address.
You're now our ex.
I wouldn't go quite that far. How about soon to be retiring? How about that?
It's your announcement to make.
No, from the board, not from my
Okay.
my wife won't let me quit.
All right.